Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the April 24th, 2024 Diversion Authority Finance Committee meeting. Would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis.
Here.
Mayor Carlson.
Here.
Mayor Mahoney.
Here.
Mr. Steen.
Here.
Mr. Grinberg.
Here.
Mr. Pipcorn.
Here.
Mr. Peterson. Mr. Reitz.
Here.
Ms. Madriga.
Here.
Ms. Thompson.
Here.
Ms. Johnson. Mr. Redlinger.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Paul. Item number 2 is to approve the minutes of March 27th. They are in your packet. They have been distributed.
Move to
As
approve.
presented. I have a motion
Second.
to approve. Do a second, please.
Here. Second.
I have a second. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of March 27, 2024 as distributed. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 3 is to approve the order of the agenda. Again, Finance Commissioners, it has been distributed and it is in front of you.
Move to approve. Second.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Grinberg seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the order of the agenda as distributed. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 4 is to approval of the bills. We'll call on Susan Thompson, Finance Director for the City of Fargo.
The bills to be approved for April are on page 6. There are about 10 of them, totaling $7.1 million. The largest, the Water Resource District, included a couple large land purchases and some easements, and otherwise everything else is pretty consistent with what we typically see.
Any members of the Finance Committee have any questions on the bills that are being presented today?
Move to approve.
Mayor Mahoney moves to approve the bills as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Pipcorn. Been moved and seconded to approve $7,166,699.92. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Oh, excuse me, we're going to do a roll call on this. Paul, would you please help me with that?
Certainly. Mayor Dardis.
Yes.
Mayor Carlson.
Yes.
Mayor Mahoney.
Aye.
Mr. Steen.
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger.
Yes.
Mr. Grinberg.
Aye.
Mr. Pipcorn.
Aye.
Mr. Reitz.
Yes.
Ms. Madriga. And Ms. Thompson.
Yes.
Motion pass.
All right, thank you. For the record, those are bills that have been received through April 17th. Again, we'll call on Susan Thompson, Finance Director, for a finance report.
All right, page 23, that is the historical revenues and expenditures. And then page 24 is the statement of net position for both the project fund and the budget fund. There's assets of $245,238,063. Some nominal liabilities of $176,000, so a net position for all funds of $245,061,927.
Thank you. Anyone from the Finance Committee have any questions on the finance report?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
as a reminder, which line item in our cash held is part of the Minnesota escrow for, didn't we have action in the prior month or two where we set aside some of our cash for Minnesota?
Oh, those are in the actual project payments that are down farther in the agenda.
Okay.
I can't remember the
We're not
page.
listing those as an asset, a cash escrow?
They're, I'm sorry, I can't hear you very well.
Cash escrow from that, what we, is that money ultimately will come back to the diversion, as I understand it, but it's set aside now as our commitment?
For the
Paul's
eminent domain,
Yep, yeah,
we're going
eminent.
to ask Mr. Barthol to please
Sorry.
step to the microphone.
My ears are blocked.
Is your mic on?
Try that. Is that better? Thank you. Those will show up as a disbursement within the budget. once that is deemed extra or not needed as it goes through the process and it gets returned, then you'll see it as a credit into our cash account at that point. So right now, it will appear as if we've spent that money, but it's just being held in escrow by the courts or by the property owners that way.
And that's for the process of eminent domain in Minnesota.
Correct.
And that amount again was?
There was about 600,000 that was through the city of Moorhead through their eminent domain process, and a little over 10 million for Clay County. Excuse me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions on the finance report? This is an actionable item. I need a motion.
Move for approval.
Thank you, Commissioner Grinberg. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Mr. Steen seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the finance report for $245,061,927. Is there any further discussion? This is a roll call vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Excuse me, a voice vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 6 is the cash budget report. Again, we call on Mr. Barthol for that. Paul?
Thank you, Chairman Dardis. Members of the committee, nothing out of the ordinary to report this month. As you can see, we are accumulating the Cass County and City of Fargo sales tax. Reminder that these numbers are through the end of March, so we're basically reporting out the first quarter. We are a little bit behind, but projected for the first quarter, but we're also tend to lag a month or two in our sales tax as it's reported out here. The other thing I'd like to point out too is with our financing proceeds, there was a request by board members to see how the financing and what the proceeds are there. So we have included that line item within the month by month basis, so you can see how we're doing on a monthly basis. But so far, nothing really to report on the income and the revenue sources. We also have not requested any funding from the legacy bonds yet this year. We are in the process of preparing that, so you should see something there in the next month or two.
Thank you.
Then we'll go into the spending. Again, nothing too much out of the ordinary, except you do see that large cash outlay for the lands impacted by property mitigation. Majority of that was for the eminent domain process in Minnesota. And so this is where the cash outlay shows up within the budget. Other than that, there's nothing really above and beyond. I can take any questions on level 2 if we want to go into that detail. Otherwise, we can go to the last slide with the operations budget. Again, through the first quarter, we're tracking on budget for that. And we'll, if we continue to track on this way, we should be fine for the $1.65 million for that budget. Any questions?
Thank you. Questions? Anyone? Thank you. Item number 7 is normally reserved for the DA board approval contracting actions. There's nothing to report this month, so we'll move on to number 8 is the memorandums of understanding and agreements. We're going to call on Mr. John Shockley, legal counsel for the Diversion Authority. He has a number of items to discuss with us.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Finance Committee. I have a number of items, none of which are very significant by themselves in value, but they do have some importance. The first item is a little bit of background. There is a solar garden that is being proposed, and my understanding is actually under construction south of the Southern Embankment location on the Minnesota side. We needed their consent as part of the eminent domain proceedings, and they wanted to construct a solar garden, which appears to be consistent with the operations of the project, because you'd be flooding it, and you don't want their solar panels to float away. And so our engineering team said, yeah, it's consistent, but from my standpoint, I wanted to make sure that there was a release from the company so that if in the future that, if there's a tank that floats by or ice jam or something and it takes out a number of their solar panels, that they're not going to come back and sue the authority for placing the structure within existing flowage easement. And so they were agreeable to that. So it's a release agreement. There's a couple parties that sign it. The MCCJPA, because it's actually being condemned by a different party, and we had to have a bunch of different signatures on it. And the authority needed to sign it because the authority would potentially be a party to litigation because they're operating the project. So that's the first item. I can go through all four of them if you want to take them.
Question.
Mr. Steen has a question.
Say, John, thanks. I read through that and I was a little confused. So this is land that we've acquired or a flowage easement. This is like zone 1, 2, 3. What's it considered?
I believe it's in zone 1. I don't see
Okay, so-
Eric around,
so the
but
question I
Paul
have
is
then-
shaking his head yes.
So
it is
we're
in zone
allowing
1.
structures now in zone 1?
This did not qualify as a structure because people aren't living there. It's not like a storage. It's a non-residential structure, so it was permitted. But still, I was concerned about the potential liability of something interfering with these structures. So from a long-term standpoint for energy production, it's a good thing that you can potentially put these in areas like this. And the engineering team reviewed it to make sure there wasn't any conflicts between the proposed project and what they're constructing. So
So this is not considered a structure. We're talking solar panels?
yeah, it's solar panels, and they put them on bases. There will be concrete bases that are elevated, very similar to some of the other utilities. They'll be elevating them, putting them on a concrete structure. I guess there's enough room, and I'm the wrong person to answer the mechanical aspects of it, but I guess there's enough room for the water to flow in and out. And I'll let Paul, he's going to jump up and talk about the technical side.
Going to get my steps in today. No, we did work with Novell and their design team. These are basically on, as John was explaining, on posts. So the actual panels themselves are set above the 500-year flood elevation, and so those are going to be up and out of there. It's just basically pipes sticking up out of the ground to hold those in place. And then there is one transformer box that we had raised up above the pad itself is up above the 100-year elevation.
So, not to be a stickler on this, but I'm just curious. That's the first I've heard of any type of structure being allowed on the zone 1. I could be wrong. I don't hear everything, but it's the first I've heard. And so, couldn't we build? I'm just curious. Couldn't we build elevator storage bins that are up on stilts and above the floodplain? And then we've got it's not a structure because it's on stilts above the floodplain.
The one difference with this is that Novell had already signed a lease with the property owner. When we purchased the flowage easements, we obtained the rights, and there's a damage payment for any future construction that way. And so with the existing lease in place, we had to honor that. And at the time, the best solution we thought was to continue to allow them to build, because it could have trickle-down impacts elsewhere on the project if we didn't allow that lease to go forward.
And then help me out here. One other question, maybe one. We refer to release or and releasee, and talked about water flow and that type of thing. And these are solar panels, so how does water flow tie into that?
So we're trying to talk about the water flowing from the project. So as you operate the project, the structures will close, the tainter gates will close down, and it will allow so much water through the Red River and through the Wild Rice, and the diversion channel will open, but you'll have water flow that will fluctuate at different levels underneath the solar panels, and in theory it'll flow in and out
Through that property.
Yeah, and so we wanted to make clear that the movement of water water can have a lot of power. And so as it moves, if it tipped one of the solar panels one way or another because of the movement or the water froze, and we just want to be clear that any of those movements, they were releasing us from it.
So I need to correct an earlier statement. This is in zone 4 rather than in
Well, that makes a
zone 1.
difference. Okay.
So,
That's why I asked the first question was which zone it was in. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
And there's no cost to this. This is, it's a benefit to the authority to get this release of liability.
Any questions on item A under 8A? All right, please continue.
Okay, the next item is outcropping of work package 38C. And a little bit of background, work package 38C is a work package which combined multiple structures that needed to be demolished. You may remember back, we went through a contracting process where we pre-selected 4 or 5, I think, is it 4? 4, yeah, 4 companies that would be able to conduct demolition of these structures that have been acquired. So they'll be pulling the structure out of the ground and the foundation. They needed access to dirt to fill in where they pulled a foundation out of the different parcels. The engineering team wanted to give access to this parcel for those teams to get excess material, haul it back to the site, and fill in the hole. And so this is a liability issue that if somebody was out there driving, got injured, any type of accident, that the authority is indemnified. And also the Cass County Joint Water Resource District, which is the underlying owner of the property. So there's no cost to the dirt necessarily, but we wanted to make sure that there was no liability that would flow from a potential accident.
All right. Any questions on item B, 8B? Please continue.
Okay, this is a little bit of background again. Army Corps of Engineers has taken over the remaining construction of the Oxbow-Hickson-Baki levee. You'll recall that there's about a quarter of the levee that remains to be completed. Prior to this, the Diversion Authority was constructing that. The Army Corps of Engineers is taking that over, and we needed an agreement in place between the City of Oxbow and the Authority to complete that project, setting forth that the authority is going to work with the Army Corps of Engineers to complete the design and construction of it, and with reviews to be completed by the City of Oxbow. The authority is going to reimburse the City of Oxbow for reasonable reviews, and then as with the prior agreement, the authority would be responsible for the maintenance of the levee.
Any questions on 8C?
Mr. Chairman, help us understand what a reasonable review cost is. Estimate.
I'm going to defer to the engineers on, they have pretty good engineering like guidelines for what scope of services are. I don't know, maybe Chris, when you go and do reviews for engineering costs, what goes into your analysis?
So in this particular case, Mr. Chair and committee members, we are allowing, there is some infrastructure we're building that will ultimately be maintained by the City of Oxbow. There are some storm sewer systems, so we did allow them for their engineer to do some reviews. Again, that time has been in the matter of hours of time for them to do a quick review of our plans, but I don't anticipate that to be a significant cost, but we did allow them, if they chose to do those reviews of those plans.
So incidental?
What's that?
Incidental expenses?
In general, yes. I mean, it would be in the thousands of dollars, not tens of thousands of dollars in my mind, but again, they haven't submitted any to us to date, so just for awareness to the board.
Just to close, Mr. Chairman, I mean, we haven't dealt with any expenses for Oxbow for some time. We closed the book on that. So when it comes back up, I think it's just important to note that.
Yep.
And Article 8 of the agreement covers that specific section where we review their costs, and if there's an objection to their costs, we can object to it. So,
Mr. Steen also has a question.
Yeah, Chris, you probably maybe could have stood up there, maybe not, maybe it's real easy. There's a section 801 here on referencing to future changes or additions. The OHB levy crossings, it talks about the city retains the ability at its sole cost and expense to adjust the levy crossings to the extent which may be accomplished without adversely affecting, changing, whatever. It goes on to say this is the sole cost to the city. Just curious as to how we're monitoring that, or if and who's the go-between? And I see that because the Corps is responsible for constructing this. You got the city reviewing the plans, and then we've got, we want a bigger crossing. And who's going to actually pay for that? I'm curious because I've been around long enough to know that these agreements sound great, but sometimes they're hard to enforce because, this is the way we want it, and you don't want us to, be unhappy with the outcome. So I'm just curious. There's a couple sections in here about the city shall pay for these changes, and who monitors that? Whose responsibility is that?
Yeah, so ultimately, Mr. Chair and committee members, this responsibility will fall back to the diversion authority to monitor on a day-to-day basis under our agreement with the Corps for general O&M operations and maintenance functions. Again, our allowance in here is really more of a matter of spelling out what things would be allowed, things that we worked out with the Corps as far as when what could be done under general maintenance and minor corrections versus more significant ones that would need additional permits and reviews. So it would be, again, a diversion authority's responsibility to monitor that, if you will, and then work with the city. Again, in these two cases, that's probably a relatively unlikely item. The two roadways that are crossed here are gravel roads that are on the very edges of town, mostly serving ag and the Baki subdivision. So there's probably little likelihood that there's going to be major change, but we wanted to make clear what could be done in those upper layers and related to the roadway purposes that would be allowed to be done without needing to go through a formal permit and major review process with the Corps of Engineers. I don't know if that helps clarify, but it'll be our responsibility to monitor.
I know what it says, and I just bring it up because of an awareness and what's happened in the past to some of these, not this one specifically, but some of these agreements where, that's not really what we're going to do.
Fair enough.
So anyway, just a thought there, just so someone's aware of it. And,
yep.
All right,
Thank
thanks.
you. Any additional questions on item 8C? Shockley, you have anything else on 8C, or are you moving on to 8D?
Mr. Chair, I do not have anything additional on 8C.
All right, then we'd ask that you move forward to 8D.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Finance Committee. The final item I have is an MOU regarding a utility relocations. It follows a very similar format as our other MOUs for utility relocations. It sets forth the general parameters of the invoicing, the rules and requirements from the Corps that you might have looked at in the packet, the federal regulations and certifications that they're required to sign. And then as part of the MOU, task orders would be issued for specific utility relocates that are subject to the terms and conditions of the MOU. So happy to answer any questions, but it's a pretty straightforward MOU following our, what I would characterize as our standardized MOU for third-party utility relocates.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Any questions?
I move to approve the MOUs and agreements A, B, C, and D.
Mayor Mahoney moves that 8A, B, C, D all be approved. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Mayor Carlson seconds. Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. Paul, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Dardis,
Yes.
Mayor Carlson,
Yes.
Mayor Mahoney,
Aye.
Mr. Steen,
Yes.
Mr. Redlinger,
Yes.
Mr. Grinberg,
Aye.
Mr. Pipcorn,
Aye.
Mr. Reitz,
Yes.
Ms. Madriga,
Yes.
and Ms. Thompson.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shockley.
Mr. Chair, I did have one item, just wanted to provide an update to the Finance Committee, if that's okay.
Please do.
So the Finance Committee will recall that we recently reissued the temporary refunding improvement bond for Cass County Joint Water Resource District. As you may recall, temporary refunding improvement warrants are only valid for 3 years, and so you have to renew them. There are 3 sets of temporary warrants. The temporary warrants that we just renewed are for the refunding improvement bond, the temporary refunding improvement bond. The next series are the warrants that backstop the WIFIA loan. And so we're going through a renewal of those in June. And then the final tranche is for the temporary warrants for the P3 developer. There's no new debt being issued, they're just being reissued. And so you might see a few resolutions come through, but it's one of those things that we have to do every 3 years. And then when we reach project financial completion, then we'll issue temporary warrants on all 3 of those tranches. As many of the Finance Committee will recall, that first tranche for the refunding improvement bonds, that'll be dependent upon final project costs to see how much that actually is. But I kind of wanted to give you a preview of, in the upcoming months, you'll see some of those things being done. And then in another 3 years after those temporary warrant, the second set of temporary warrants expires, then we'll be doing some of the permanent warrants. So happy to answer any questions. It's a area that I really enjoy. So if you have any questions, happy to talk them through.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Questions, anyone? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next order of business is other business. And we'll be calling on Paul again today with regard to the land acquisition directives. He has a number of items to discuss with us, A through 3, or 1 through 3, excuse me. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee members, I give apologies from Ms. Smith. She is in mediation this afternoon trying to close on several parcels. So she's asked me to step in. So I will do my best to present and answer any questions that way. So before you are 3 land acquisition directives. Just a reminder for the board, these are the mechanism in which the board allocates funds to the Cass County Joint Water Resource District, or the MCC JPA, to go purchase properties under their purview. The first one is actually just a cleanup type item. That's an in-town, 9213 is an in-town parcel that we've gotten the permanent easement on. We've obtained that easement, but we realized as we were closing out the books, we did not have a land acquisition directive to cover that expenditure. So the first one is just a cleanup item. The second one is a forest mitigation property. Per our permits, we are required to reestablish forest and forest wetlands to replace those, much like we have done with Drain 27 or within the channel, to replace those environmental assets that we are disturbing with our project. This is a parcel that's been identified, and it's 29 acres just on the east side of the Red River in Minnesota. And it's been identified by the Corps as an acceptable location for this forest mitigation. So the request here is to allocate $300,000 towards to go towards the purchase of those 29 acres. The third one is in the upstream mitigation area. Peggy, can you go to the map on this one? It might be a little easier to explain that way. So the Buffalo Red Water Resource District is in the process of doing a levee around the city of Wolverton. That is the green on this map that's in front of you, that kind of the aqua green, not the green hash, but that aqua green that goes around the city of Wolverton. they've just basically finalized their alignment. And so anything outside of that alignment, we need to secure a flowage easement. And so now that their alignment is refined, we were able to identify the parcels that we need to purchase the flowage easement on. And then, so that's, this land acquisition directive provides the MCC JPA with the funding to go out and the authorization to go out and purchase those flowage easements in and around, around the city of Wolverton. Are there any questions on any of the three?
Questions, Commissioner? Anyone? All right. This is an actionable item, and we'll have a roll call vote.
Question, Bernie, or Mayor Dardis.
Please.
Paul,
Mayor Mahoney.
just a question on the pricing. Is that for the easements or is that for the dike? On Wolverton.
On Wolverton, those are for the easements. The cost of the underlying levy that Buffalo Red is doing, they are paying for that.
Okay, thank you.
So this is just for the flowage easements around the city of Wolverton.
Any additional questions?
Move to approve 9A, 1, 2, and 3.
Thank you, Mayor Carlson. We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Susan Thompson seconds. Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on land acquisition directives A, 1, 2, and 3? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Mayor Dardis?
Yes.
Mayor Carlson?
Yes.
Mayor Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Steen?
Yes.
Mr. Grinberg?
Aye.
Mr. Pipcorn?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson's not here. Mr. Reitz?
Yes.
Ms. Madriga?
Yes.
Ms. Thompson?
Yes.
And Mr. Redlinger?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Paul. Item B, under other business, is legal and consultant compensation in 2023. We're going to call on Mr. Barthol, who's put this report together. It was at the request of one of our finance committee members. Please.
Thank you, Chairman. In front of you, you have a chart and should have a sheet of paper there. Please be aware that it is two-sided, so the remainder of the second chart is on the back of the first of the page. So looking at their 2023 legal costs, and let me take a step back with that. All of the following costs, everything that is on this page is within, contained within and consistent with the program budget. And so we're consistent there. Also, the three categories that are listed there, Authority, Cass County Joint, MCC, JPA, the numbers that you see are consistent with as they roll up into that program budget. So there could be some caveats here and there about reimbursements, but this is how the numbers all roll up into that program budget. So if you'll see the total legal costs for 2023 was a little bit over $3.8 million total, of which about 1.2 was with the authority, and the other major one was again with Cass County Joint at just under $2 million. Within consultant costs, you can see this does include the consultants that are working to do appraisals, land acquisition, those type of things for Cass County Joint and the MCC JPA, along with all of the consultants that are working here for the authority and fall under their purview. So the total that was spent under the authority was just over 27 million, with the total cost of consultants last year in 2023 of just over 29.6 million.
Big number for the public.
I'm sorry?
You know what I mean?
We're hearing from somebody on Zoom, is that it? Okay, all right. Are there any questions on this report?
Mr. Chair, first of all, I want to thank you for putting all this on here. I appreciate it, and it's great information. And I guess my question was obviously Onstead Twitchell of the 3.8 million for legal fees, they're 3.4 million. And my question was how much of that was John Shockley reimbursed for? So, but I totally get that it's all combined together. And I do appreciate, I guess in the past, Dorsey and Whitney, that was not included in the finance committee. And so from now on, obviously I would anticipate that being included in there. So thank you for doing that. And then I also, Martin Nicholson, I wanted to know how much his compensation was. And I assume that's the 524. So I appreciate knowing those numbers. So thank you very much for putting that on the agenda.
Our pleasure. Any additional questions from anybody on this report? All right, our next meeting is May 22nd. Please mark your calendars for that. Is there any other business that should come before the Finance Committee today, brought forth by any Finance Committee members? Is there any staff that would like to bring anything forward in other business today? Seeing none, again, we've concluded our business. We stand adjourned. Thank you.